I hope everyone's been at home practicing some social distancing if possible, especially during these times, but look on the bright side, you've got more time to watch content like this, KARQ'S Reviews Fan Edition. Today's episode is a scrim submitted by Moribra through Twitter. Let's take a look at a scrim VOD with some D.Va defense on Eichenwalde. First thing Mori does here is fly up and over the building to scout the front door to see what heroes the enemy team is playing. I love that you're doing this as D.Va because she is one of the better heroes to do this with her short mobility cooldown and huge HP pool and her matrix. Scouting in Overwatch is simply just looking ahead past choke points to see what the enemy team is playing or where they're going. This allows you to make proper decisions in positioning, where to engage, how to engage, to minimize poke damage, and the element of surprise. However, in this case, the enemy team actually threw a curveball at them. Watch what happens.
Oh, they did the thing!
Well, turns out the enemy team ran the Symmetra Mei combo and teleported the Rhine over the top of the roof, and luckily Mori was the recipient of the Rhine charge, meaning he survives, and the surprise attack fails for the enemy. Now, initially, Mori did do the right thing and scouted the few heroes at the beginning. He just didn't manage to see the Symmetra in time to prepare his team in anticipation for some sort of teleporter play. Perhaps next time you could have maybe scouted up 1 second after the doors open to give the enemy team some time to walk out to this blue highlighted area to better assess what composition they're running so they're not so clumped up at the door. As your team cleans up, I love the comms so far. You know, your Rhine is calling out that he's going to shatter the next play.
I'm playing shatter here.
You're up on the bridge. You're staying up ahead early to scout and see if they switched off Symmetra. Again, your positioning here is great because it allows you to do meaningful poke damage on top of scouting. Oftentimes you'll find D.Vas play behind the Rhine here this early, and let's be honest, you don't do any damage at this range, as compared to playing where you were here to poke and matrix yourself out. The next play rolls out, your Mei walls off half the team, your Rhine gets a great shatter, and you start the fight strong, but you guys do end up losing it at the end.
Rhine inside.
Is there no person?
I'm pulling back. Okay, so on high ground. I'm pulling back right.
Wait, play slow.
Yeah.
Run, on run.
Oh, just pull back.
He pinned me?
When they play heals, I'm just pulling back.
So if we backtrack, you focus down the shattered targets, and that's fine. And as soon as the Zarya starts lasering you down, you boost her up to escape her range, but you end up taking like a long route around back in the fight in which 2 of your teammates end up dying and traded back as kills. While we can't see what happened behind the walls, I would say after the Zarya began challenging you, you may have been able to boost her up to the high ground bridge here. Now this effectively stops Zarya from damaging you since you're over her head now, and allows you to pinch the rest of the enemies who are stuck in the room since your team engaged with the shatter in that direction to begin with. Your reaction time to the Zarya threat was great and you didn't take too much damage, so taking this spot in hindsight would have likely been the more optimal play in potentially securing the team fight win. The enemy team captures the first point and we move into the payload phase. On the next push, your team calls for the bomb shatter play.
From where?
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Let me just come up from up top real quick.
Yeah.
Sending it over their head in 3, 2, 1, over the back.
Yeah. Bidding. Watch crate. Watch left.
Now here's something I didn't hear in the comms and didn't see you checking for, which is Zarya bubbles. Something I notice a lot of players do, even at the highest level, is tunnel vision into an offensive combo play without calling out or anticipating what the enemy team could do to counter that. While the play seems to have worked out in this case, it might not as you progressively play against better players and better teams. As far as I know, the enemy team still had both their Zarya bubbles and the Baptiste immortality field, and it could have went very poorly and you would have lost both your D.Va bomb and Earth Shatter cooldowns if, for example, the Baptiste decided to lamp your bomb and the enemy Rhine just held his ground to block the shatter, or if Zarya simply just bubbled the bomb line of sight. For next time, definitely try to force those cooldowns out that can counter the specific plays before going for them. As the next fight begins, your Mei gets an early pick, already securing an advantage for your team, and I love how you're anticipating and expecting the Zarya grab because it hasn't come out yet all game. You waited for the engagement on your Rhine, and until the Zarya was fully committed, held your matrix down the entire time, eating it. Beautiful D.Va play here, not much to say. As we move on, McCree is up forward, scouting and poking a bit, but he takes some damage, and as you said it in the comms here,
Just careful, Smiley.
Okay, yeah.
We don't have heals up here.
You don't have heals up here, so he has to back out. But you can see now how McCree isn't the best hero to scout for long periods since he's so vulnerable, and as soon as he backs out, you actually needed to step out briefly with your defense matrix to see where the enemy team is going. And in this case, they went to castle, but you guys found out a little too late, and now you're all stuck on low ground and forced to play low on the cart. As soon as the previous teamfight finished, your Ryan and other members of your team actually should have moved up to the high ground to start to account for a castle push. And as we play this out, you gotta make do with what you got here. So you get a nice boop on the soldier and finish him off. Your Mei has the right idea in trying to wall to block the high noon from the enemy, but messed up the execution a bit. But regardless, the initial poor macro positioning collectively as a team already put you at a disadvantage, and I think you guys would have still lost the fight. Next fight, you guys engage. I like what you're doing here, just coming out with some damage, not using Matrix just yet, and as soon as you hear the visor, that's when you held the button down, effectively negating him. Nicely done. Your McCree pops off with the high noon in combination with your Mei ult, and a funky little 1v1 here. I like how you boosted into the Mega Health Pack to securely finish off the McCree. Perhaps adding in a melee at the end of the booster to help with the initial burst damage could have prevented you from demeching, but all in all, not too much was lost since you were able to jump off and get back to your team in time before the next push. As we move on, a little late on the scouting here, but you were just able to see the Mei in time to know that they're coming through the castle. The enemy McCree gets sped into your team and rounds the corner to flash you before you can Matrix, and they hard engage. Your Ryan pulls off a huge shatter, and this is where I would have actually immediately bombed because that 1 second hesitation gave them enough time to get up from the shatter and escape around the corner. And I know even though the enemy Lucio beated, a bomb from this close does 1000 damage, which is more than enough even through a Lucio beat that's already probably beginning to decay as well. As we move into the third phase, your team gets a nice initial pick, and the enemy actually tosses a D.Va bomb that unfortunately gets walled up instead of walled off by your team, and you guys now need to reset to take one more fight at the end. As you come out of the spawn, enemy team messes up a bit, as you can see here, and you use quite a bit of Matrix to help minimize the damage your team is taking. I think the idea is okay, but they really weren't taking too much since your Ryan had his shield up the whole time. Right after this, you can hear the enemy McCree starts his high noon up top right. And I see your reaction here to turn in Matrix immediately, which I think isn't that necessary. It takes about 1 second for McCree's damage to ramp up with the skulls, and if you instinctively use Matrix upon hearing that high noon sound cue, you end up wasting like a third of your Matrix bar, right? You only have 2.5 seconds on a full Matrix. 1 second is a lot. I know your Mei walled him off this time around, but that's something to always keep in mind as a D.Va against McCree. Other than that, great play here. You Matrix the Baptiste damaged the result, eating the Fire Strike right after. As the final fight approaches, I love how you're calling out an anticipation of the enemy Mei ult, and you're actively in a cheeky spot up here to try to eat it with the Matrix. Good Mei ult by your team to force the enemy beat out, and as soon as your Mei's ult expires, you know the enemy's Mei ult is coming right after it.
I'm getting frozen. I'm just hard shooting. Watch Ryan. Can we get Ryan? Ryan's pushing me. Watch Ryan.
I ate it.
And you slurp it right up and follow it up with a huge bomb. Overall, your D.Va is really solid. I couldn't include the entire round in this video and skip some parts that showcased and reinforced the fact that you do have great mechanics on D.Va and good game sense in order to anticipate when to use Matrix. The only things you need to work on is just refining what you're already good at. You showed glimpses of solid scouting and execution on plays, but there were some times where you fell asleep a bit, maybe a little late on certain scouting positions, a little late on following up with the bomb, perhaps forgetting that the enemy team has counters to your combos. I think just being a little more cognizant of those finer details will help transform your already great gameplay into excellent gameplay. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the Defiant channel up here and watch the rest of the series down here.